Pledge of Allegiance, Councilmember White.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Give us just a moment for some technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
Okay. Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Jordan. Okay, we'll go back. Personal appearance is on her way, so we'll go back to that. Ordinances. A, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2022-67.
An ordinance approving the 2023 intergovernmental agreement with the Mid-America Regional Council Solid Waste Management District for participation in the Regional Household Hazardous Waste Program.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I guess,
Go ahead.
do we have a date for any of this yet, or, no? Okay.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
Powell,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion passes. B, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-68.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Chapter 2, Article 3 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Belton, Missouri, to create the Department of Human Resources.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or information? Oh, she's here. Go ahead.
Yeah, we actually, we do have a new human resources person on staff that we've hired recently. She's hit the ground running and doing outstanding, and this is hopefully going to formalize that we have this as an actual department. As it is, the position exists as underneath finance, and we think that for human resources to do its job adequately and efficiently and effectively, that it needs to be a standalone department so that there's no influence from other parts of the organization at all, so employees can feel secure in having those conversations that sometimes need to be had with human resources, and so that's why we're trying to create a department by itself.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I think we have a dog.
We do. All right, we're going back to personal appearances. A, recognition of Belton top dog named Jax.
Diane smells good.
Cute. That was like a full bear.
Come on, Renee.
All right.
He wants it.
All right, Belton's Top Dog 2022, the certificate is awarded to Jax, November 26, 2022. Congratulations.
Where's his treat? He don't get any dog treats for winning?
He won a prize pack at the mayor's Christmas.
Okay.
Cute dog.
Full bear.
Top dog.
Top dog. He's just excited he got to go for a car ride. What are you talking about?
Top dog. He was a sniffer or something. Yeah, so, huh?
Item C, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-69.
An ordinance amending sections 1-5, 18-8, 40-1H, and 40-415 of the Unified Development Code to modify existing regulations and adopt new regulations related to the regulation of comprehensive marijuana facilities.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Yep, these are UDC text amendments to accommodate comprehensive adult use marijuana to comply with Amendment 3, which was approved by Missouri voters on November 8th. This does add, the amendment is included in the packet for reference. This does add 4 sections, or amends 4 sections in the code. Section 1 includes the general definitions, which would add new and revised definitions for comprehensive and micro-business facilities, as well as minor amendments to the existing medical marijuana definitions. Section 40-415 amends the conditions that currently apply to medical marijuana facilities to include comprehensive and micro-business facilities as well. Section 40-1H adds comprehensive and micro-business facilities as uses subject to conditions in the same zoning districts as comparable medical marijuana facilities. And then Section 18-8 adds medical, comprehensive, and micro-business marijuana facilities to the same zoning districts in the North Scott Overlay District as allowed elsewhere in the city. Facilities that are allowed in industrial zoning districts will be allowed in the FCI, which is the Flex Commercial Industrial Zoning District in the North Scott Overlay. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on December 5th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the text amendments. Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the amendments, and staff also recommends approval.
Any questions? Go ahead, use your microphone.
Right here.
I'm just staying on top of you.
So, in 40, I gotta go back down to it, 40-4, it's talking about church, and it says permanent, so that would rule out any church that may be operating. It's on. Well, it was.
Way to go, Jordan.
So, in other words, a church that is renting out someplace would not be classified as permanent?
No, that is not correct. The definition of church, which comes directly from the amendment, permanent modifies the building, not the congregation. So it's a permanent building primarily and regularly used as a place of worship. So if a church is renting out a space and is using that space primarily and regularly for church services, it would be considered a church under Amendment 3 and under your UDC.
Okay. And then it's talking about schools, but then it rules out private schools?
Again, that definition comes directly from Amendment 3 and DHSS regulations priorly adopted.
So it does rule out private schools?
That has been an interpretation that has been given. In this situation in Belton, I don't believe that it would be applicable because I'm also unaware of a private school in the city.
Well, there is a private Christian school.
But and regardless, this is, again, we are just simply adopting exactly what was in the amendment.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
At the top of page 28, is there something missing, or it just starts out with the word termination like it came from some other place? At least on my page 28.
So the actual Section 2, which was the amendment that approved comprehensive marijuana, starts at the bottom of that page. So you'll see Section 2. Everything before that, the first 18 pages of that document were the amendment that was adopted in 2019 or 2018 for medical marijuana. So we didn't include that because nothing was changed in that amendment.
Oh, okay, so section,
So
the relevant
actual-
stuff starts with Section 2.
Correct.
Okay, and then on page, well, this is just in general, where do the police fit in? Do we have to have a ordinance on the code of ordinances that outline when they can or cannot arrest people, or are they're enforcing this stuff?
There will be code changes coming to the offensive section of the Code of Ordinances in January.
Okay, and then finally, it's unclear to me. I mean, particularly since later we talk about drugs in the workplace and stuff like that, but is this defined as a drug? I mean, it says someplace where you can only smoke marijuana in non-public places, and then it also says you can't smoke it in comprehensive facilities. So I guess you can smoke it in your home. But if I'm just walking down the street and some guy's smoking marijuana, it's not like he's smoking a cigarette, right? I could call the police and say, hey, that guy's smoking marijuana. What's the deal?
Unless the city council adopts an ordinance authorizing the use of marijuana in a public place, it cannot be smoked or ingested in a public place.
Okay.
That includes sidewalks.
And so even if I walked into a comprehensive facility where they sell medical marijuana, and I smell it, I say, hey, who's smelling? You know, I'm not that I'm going to do that, but I'm just trying to find where the dividing line is here.
A comprehensive facility would still be considered a public place, again, under DHSS regulations. So unless the city council adopted an ordinance authorizing the use of marijuana in those places, you cannot use marijuana in those places.
Okay.
And then also, I apologize to Councilmember White. I didn't have the definition of elementary or secondary school pulled up, but it does include any private school giving instruction in a grade or grades not higher than 12th grade.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
only that there was a lot there to read. I didn't get through it all because there was just so much there that it was pretty complicated. I did think a little ironic for something you would get thrown in jail for when I was in college. We're now passing in city levels to grow it, so it's kind of a bit of long circle.
Anybody else? You two? All right.
No questions.
What?
I'm good.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries. D, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-70.
An ordinance amending sections 1-5, 2-117, 2-137, 2-138, 2-139, 30-8G, 30-9, 40-1H, 40-42, and 40-43 of the Unified Development Code to modify existing regulations and adopt new regulations to improve the effectiveness of the code.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Yep, this set of UDC text amendments are to accommodate several code amendments, most of which would bring the code in compliance with state statutes. Following is a quick summary. The Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Adjustment sections in Chapter 2 are proposed to be amended to clarify membership, the conduct of meetings, and powers and duties to be consistent with state statutes. Sections 1-5, which are the general definitions, and Chapter 30-9, sign standards, are proposed to be amended to add definitions and standards for exterior window signage in non-residential zoning districts. And then the remaining sections to be amended are all related to state statutes that were amended and effective on August 28th, 2022, related to the regulations and licensing of home-based businesses and occupations. The revised statutes limit what cities can and cannot regulate. Staff has worked through numerous drafts to create a set of home-based businesses and occupation standards to operate that we believe complies with the intent of the statutes. This would allow businesses to operate with minimal regulation or oversight while still protecting residential neighborhoods from businesses that may have a negative impact on public health, safety, or certain nuisances. Since there were numerous and significant changes to the home-based business and occupation standards, a red line version of the changes were included in the packet for reference. Planning Commission held a public hearing on these amendments on November 7th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the amendments. The Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the text amendments, and staff also recommends approval.
Any discussion? Go ahead.
I was having a hard time finding it, so where I found something, I'm assuming it's in this, but we'll see. When it's referring to home business, it indicates that people can work in their yard or store things in their yard but as long as it wasn't viewed by the street. So you're limiting home businesses to the center of the property, and because if you're on a corner lot and you have a wire fence, they can see throughout the whole lot. And so home businesses would not be allowed to occur on corner lots if they needed to do things outside.
Well, I think that was directly from the state statutes, some of those changes, as long as it wasn't visible from the street. So if you are on a corner lot, you would have to have a privacy fence if you're doing certain things. Now, that doesn't mean that you can disregard the nuisance regulations. If we have other nuisance regulations of certain storage of materials, vehicles, those types of things, that all would still apply regardless if you're attempting to screen that.
But when you're on a corner lot, your building line is back different, and so, you know, I'm on a corner lot, and my building line would cut out half my yard. And so it makes it very difficult to have a privacy fence, 8 foot, because you have to be back, because of the corner lot, you can't build your fence. And so it does restrict people on a corner lot from having home businesses.
Well, and I will say that is less restrictive than it is currently, because currently home occupation, home business can only be in the primary structure. This is now extending it to accessory structures and in some cases the yard. So it is less restrictive than what we currently have in place.
I would also note again, as Matt said, this all comes about due to statutory changes, and that definition regarding where a home occupation can occur comes directly from that statutory section. And I'd also note that it doesn't prohibit that sort of home-based business, but it would prohibit them from being considered a no-impact home-based business, which under Missouri law, no-impact home-based businesses, i.e. those that occur solely from within the structure, the primary structure and other accessory structures not visible from the street, are not required to seek any permits or licenses from the city. And the city is in fact prohibited from requiring any of them. So it does not prohibit that sort of use. It would just transfer you from a no-impact home-based business that is not required to seek any pre-approval from the city to an impact home-based business that would be required to seek pre-approval from the city.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
This is just for information. This is on page 53 about window signs. Are neon signs allowed?
Neon signs would be allowed inside the window, but for window signs, these are just windows attached to the window. So
if you have a neon sign, you can't hang it on the outside, but you can hang it on the inside.
correct.
Okay.
Like like an open sign or something
Right,
like that.
right.
That would all be interior.
Okay. And then page 50, well, on at least 2 places, and I'm kind of like Perry. I've had trouble following all the different things that are going on. I probably should have read the ordinance itself, but it mentions several times it can't be over the occupancy limit for the residents. What's an occupancy limit for a residence? I mean, I know when you have a building or a business, the fire department tells you what your occupancy by square foot or whatever, but what is it for a residence?
There's a calculation, and it's based on the size of the room, size of each bedroom, the size of each living area. So
Okay.
it's going to vary from house to house based on the floor plan.
Okay, but there is a calculation similar
there
to
is
what
a
the fire department
calculation,
uses. Okay. Okay. And then finally, if you're in an HOA area and the HOA prevents home businesses like some of these, for instance, it limits in home daycare or something, what has precedence, the HOA or the cities?
That is something that is also specifically addressed in the state statutes that gives the HOA the ability to enforce private covenants and deed restrictions that may
Okay.
prohibit home occupations.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
On page 66 in the daycare center, I just noticed years ago when I was on planning and zoning, they talked about, it was a big issue about calling something a daycare or not a daycare, and they established the number because you had people taking care of someone's kids through the day, and according to this definition, now removing any number, if you took care of 2 kids for someone while they worked, you are a home business then. And it
So-
was exempt of up to 4. in
Yeah,
the
for the purposes of these changes, only daycares that are required to be licensed by the state will need to be licensed by us and go through the special use permit, which would be commercial daycares and any in-home daycare with 6 or more children.
Okay.
So anybody under that would no longer be required to get a license from us, and they are not regulated by state.
It doesn't really state it that way here, but
So how do you regulate if they have more than 6? I mean, it's just honesty?
If we determine that there are more than 6 children, that would be something we would confirm with the state and then also look in that from a code violation standpoint.
And they're allowed to have so many relatives, is that, if I remember right?
It's generally 6 children. There's a breakdown on how many you can have under the age of 2, how many you can have of school age. So the general number is 6, but it does break down from there.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You guys, anything? James or Angela? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. E, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-71.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, amending Chapter 6, Article 9, Massage Therapy Establishments and Massage Therapists, and Appendix A, Schedule of Fees and Charges of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
second.
We have a motion and a second.
The amendments presented in this ordinance continue with what Matt was saying in the new state statute regulations that came down in August. It was also identified in this section that we would need to amend this piece of business license code to be consistent. There were also numerous changes that were identified that had happened at state level since the code was written in 2005 and 2006. So those other changes are also reflected.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. F, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-72.
An ordinance of the City of Belton, Missouri, approving a cooperative agreement between the City of Belton, Missouri, and the Mid-America Regional Council for funding operations of Operation Greenlight Traffic Control System in the amount of $11,200.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Quick question. How, do they have open meetings, and how do you make a complaint or offer a suggestion or something like that to this council that tells you how your traffic lights work?
The meetings are open for most part
Okay.
of the Mark region.
If you had a complaint, you could send it to staff, and staff often attends or is part of these meetings, or at least has communication the meetings are taking place.
Okay.
So if there's, I mean, Mark is involved in a lot of different areas, and so if there was something specifically that you had a complaint about and that you needed to take to Mark, I'd recommend, I mean, you can go about it a couple of different ways, but I'd recommend just letting staff know and having us contact them and say, hey, we've got this concern that's arisen from our elected officials.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2022-73.
An ordinance imposing a sales tax at a rate of 3% on all tangible personal property retail sales of adult use marijuana sold within the City of Belton, Missouri, pursuant to Article 15, Section 2.6-5 of the Missouri Constitution, subject to the approval by the voters of the city of the general municipal election to be held on April 4th, 2023, designating the form of ballot and directing the city clerk to provide notice of said election.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I don't know
Rick, you
if Joe wants to go first or not, but I have seen like a lot of the communities around us are also doing this. So from Kansas City, I saw Raymore doing it, Grandview's doing it. So I see this as a unified thing throughout the state that I've seen so far, so.
Yeah, essentially what this bill would do is allow us, or would put on the ballot, a 3% sales tax for recreational use marijuana only. Medical would be exempt from this, and it wouldn't affect any other items that anybody else would buy in our community. It's just literally recreational marijuana would be taxed at 3% if it got passed by the voters. And so this is essentially saying that on April 4th, 2023, we would hold a general municipal election with that question on the ballot. And yes, Councilmember Clark, you're 100% correct. Pretty much all the cities around us are going to be going and asking the same question of their voters. And I would expect I don't want to say all of them, but I would expect there would be very few cities in the state that don't go to the voters and ask for this.
Any other discussion? Go ahead.
Is there any idea where the extra 3% is going to go? Is it going to help police? Is it going to help?
Well, what this would say, if you pass this bill as is it would be a general use, or general tax, so it wouldn't be earmarked for anything specifically. We don't envision this be a terrible amount of money, terribly high amount of money, but we could see this potentially us having some potential expenses in the policing area, but we'd like to have the ability to utilize it however we could potentially utilize it, and whatever expenses come down the pike because of this, we would essentially wrap it into that.
So is this actually taxed at the current county, state, city level, 9.1 and then additional 3? Is the state adding an additional on it too, or?
The state does have an additional 6% sales tax on this.
So you're saying that right now would actually be 11.1 or 11 point something?
So the total overall sales tax burden here is all the general sales taxes that are already applicable, plus then the state authorized amount from Amendment 3, which I said 6, I think it's either 6 or 3%, then it would be the city's additional 3%.
So if it's 6, that'd be 18.1.
18.1, okay.
If it's 3, it'd be
I don't know if it's
15.
total of 6, because they're at 4.25, but you're saying an additional 6, so they would actually get 10%, and we would get 6.25. Is the county eligible to do that too?
No. The way that Amendment 3 is written, it appears that counties are only considered a local government for this section with regulatory or taxing authority when it is in the unincorporated part of the county. So if there was a dispensary in unincorporated Cass County, then it would appear that yes, the county would be able to apply this tax, but the dispensaries within the city of Belton, it does not appear based on the language of Amendment 3 that their tax would be applicable.
So I guess my question, going back to original medicinal one, that had to be within congressional district, 24 places, I think, in each congressional district. Didn't it have to be in a community too, though? I mean,
So there were originally, prior to this amendment, the selection was based on like a rating criteria, but if anybody at all followed that process, there was a significant number of lawsuits from people who did not receive a license, essentially saying that the criteria was not applied evenly. So now, under Missouri law and the amendment, all awards of dispensaries or any other type of license are via lottery. To the 24 congressional districts, there is a potential drafting inconsistency within the amendment that will have to be interpreted by the Department of Health and Senior Services. But as of right now, it does not appear that any new comprehensive facility will be able to open until 2025.
And correct me, but this is on recreational only and not medical marijuana.
Yes, that is correct. Your general sales taxes do apply to medical marijuana because it is not a prescription, it is a recommendation from a doctor. But this would add a 3% additional sales tax on the recreational adult use of marijuana only.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Resolutions, A motion approving resolution R 22-120.
A resolution approving task agreement 2022-6 with Leaf & Sons Incorporated for the Second and Chestnut Water Main Replacement Project for the not-to-exceed amount of $584,247.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I know Greg's gone.
I can give you a little bit of feedback on this, and essentially what A and B, both resolutions is we have some companies that are trying to keep their staff employed. And so we had one specific company come to us and say, hey, you know, the airport's done. We had some crews on that. But if we don't have any work right now, and we may not have much work until spring when the weather picks up, and we don't want to lose our employees because we've got some decent workforce, and workforce issues are pretty prevalent, especially in the construction field. And so they came to us and said, hey, if you'd be willing to consider it, we'd love to have some work on your potential bond projects that you would normally be letting out next year, and you can sell the bonds next year like you were planning to, and we'll essentially float them, and they would cover the costs up front, and then we would reimburse them when we sold our bonds. So we had to do an RFP process to allow us to do that, to make it an open bidding process, and two companies came to us, and they were represented A and B in these resolutions. Both of them are projects that would have normally been done in the spring. But both companies are like I said, in the interest of trying to keep their employees busy and working and not going and finding jobs elsewhere. They're willing to float these projects, and then we would repay them when we sold the bonds in 2023.
Any questions? Go ahead.
So the two amounts would not exceed the amount that we would be able to.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Was this also considered that they were giving us a discount by doing it early also?
Well,
or,
they said that they give us a better deal by doing that, and so so when we bid it out, we feel like we got competitive rates by doing it this way.
And I will add what you told me today, that one of the companies came to us to do this, but we put it out for bid, and the other one agreed to the terms. So
Yeah, we put it out for bid, and one of the terms in the RFP was that they would have to front the cost for this, and then they would get reimbursed when we sold the bonds. And so we opened that up to anybody who was willing to meet those, because as an open process, to allow that, make it fair for everybody.
Right.
And so another company saw that and said, yeah, we're willing to do that, because again, same rationale. We want to keep our employees busy and working and not lose them to someone else.
Anybody else? James, Angela? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. B, a motion approving resolution R 22-121.
A resolution approving task agreement 2022-2 with Kissick Construction for the Northeast Area Water Main Replacement Project for the not-to-exceed amount of $4,216,999.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, one motion non-debatable to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. City Council liaison reports.
For parks, the Park Department co-sponsors Operation Santa with the Belton Welfare Association. This week, park staff unloaded food and toys and prepared packages for the about 70 families who are in need, and distribution will be this Saturday at Memorial Station. Also, Midwest Pool responded to Parks' demand of a $22,500 credit be applied to the final balance for a refund caused by their breach of contract, and they agreed to that. So some good news as we have taken aquatics operation back in-house, and there's a manager of the aquatics center who will also see outdoor water park, lifeguard staffing, et cetera, this coming summer. That's parks.
Good. Rob, you have anything?
No, it's meetings tomorrow, so I can't see in the future.
All right, anybody else? Council communications. Come on, you guys gotta have something to say. Only thing I got is that we, collected another $3,500 and donated it to the Welfare Association. We presented that check on Monday, or yesterday, I believe, so that was more good news, so that's all I have.
I will say one thing, which I was asking Andrea and Matt about earlier. After a 5-year search for a contractor to do it, we finally found somebody who's going to start in the next couple of weeks putting a ADA compatible ramp in front of the old city hall. We just have too many visitors who say they can't even get up those steps. So hopefully, if you see construction going on in front of old city hall, that's what it is.
Go ahead.
Rob, do you know what the design will be like? Will it need switchbacks to get up that steep?
Yeah, as of about a year ago, our architect, to her credit, realized she'd made a mistake, and now we need a switchback, which means more concrete, more railing, more everything, more money.
Okay, thank you. I'll also say Main Street looks spectacular again. The programming going on, mostly on the weekends for families to come out, has been fantastic. We've enjoyed a lot of it, so thanks to everybody who's put effort into that. I appreciate it. It's really nice.
I will say too that Diane's here. She held the gathering of the staff, the city council and her staff, and we had a nice gathering at the Meet Me on Main, and I enjoyed the evening. Had some good food.
I guess I forgot, we went to the fire department, had a nice little Christmas dinner the other night, and we enjoyed ourselves. Now, I didn't stay around for the gingerbread making, but it was a nice event, and looking at the young kids get their badges for the first time was pretty cool, so it's always good to go to those type of events and see our employees.
Anybody else? City manager?
I have a couple of things, just a couple of things I want the public to know about, but also for you folks in the council, you should already know this. We had a Meet the City Manager video that's on our website now, if anybody's interested in I talk a little bit about the city, where I came from, and there's a lot of other interesting, some people might find interesting information in that video about just who I am. I've only been here for a few months. I am now officially a resident of Belton as of last night. So, and then rental inspection program for those who are interested in that potentially coming down the pike, which it is going to go through a process. There is an information sheet that's on our website now about kind of a rough draft of what a potential program would look like. And so we're looking for feedback on that. There's also a survey on our website. Those are both in the community, what's the section, Matt?
It's both on the community planning and building webpage.
There you go. You can find all that information and take that survey, and then also look at the proposed program. We're going to have some public hearings on that and have a whole process on that. That's not a done deal by any means. I just wanted the public to know that we are looking at that and wanting some feedback on that. And that's all I've got.
Anybody else? All right, items for review and discussion. Item A, automatic mutual aid agreements.
Good evening. Items A and B are going to be similar. A, we currently have mutual aid contracts with every Cass County Fire Department and a few outside of Cass County, including Grandview and Lee Summit and some in Johnson County. Most of those go back to sometime in the early 90s, so we felt like it was kind of time to refresh those. That's the first part of it. So they'll really look exactly the same, just making sure that all the wording's still proper and updating those. It'll also carry an element of automatic aid. We currently do automatic aid with a handful of departments, meaning that as soon as we get a fire, our dispatch contacts theirs to send us more resources. The new computer-aided dispatch system that the ESB has purchased and is currently being built out, the requirement to be able to do auto aid is that it needs to be in writing, and I couldn't find any of those contracts in writing. So this will double as both. The new system's going to improve the timing of these calls, because now it won't be a physical call from one dispatcher to another. It will pop up on the proper dispatch screen to kind of help reduce those response times from departments. So most of that's just fairly, just a little bit of house cleaning stuff. Those will come to you probably scattered out depending on how quickly we get done with each fire department. The second one is with Western Cass Fire Department. That's a fire protection district that is just south of Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant is one that we're already responsible for. We serve them through contract. But Western Cass has had several situations where they can't get adequate enough staff to cover their own fires. And so over the last year or so, up until October, we had been sharing those primary duties with Dolan West Dolan, and we had just kind of reached a point to where we couldn't do that under a mutual aid contract anymore. They have since hired several firefighters. They've been responding to all of their calls since October 1st without calling us. However, we still didn't feel that it was good business for the city to continue our old contract. Now we will still help them as long as they're responding to their own calls, but they'll have to give us reports, and they have to make a certain percentage of their calls, or this new contract will initiate a charge per call that we have to take care of when they don't show up for their own fires. And if they do that for a prolonged amount of time, it'll just cancel the contract again, because we would, if we're going to have to do it, we'd rather have a full contract like we do with Mount Pleasant than try to cover their fires for them when they're being paid to do it.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess my question to you is, I've had some communication with people down there, and I don't know how to word this, but I think they feel like they don't have adequate staff and training. And I don't know if that's where, I don't know if we're going to be in a situation where they're not trained, or they're, I don't know how that works when you go to a volunteer fire department like this. Because typically when you're dealing with South Metro or Grandview, we're not dealing with volunteers like this. So I'm just trying to figure out, when they bring all these people in, are they actually trained? Are we going in there to help them? Are we going to be putting our firefighters in a position to be harmed, is I guess my question.
So there's a lot to that question, and there many times in volunteer departments, the standards for training don't meet our standards. I do know that they have the desire to train their people. They're doing in-house training right now, and they are going to require them to be certified, state certified like everybody else. But honestly, in my whole time here, their lack of training and lack of responders have been a problem. We always send a supervisor with our folks, so there's a battalion chief or myself or the training chief that goes, so that we can monitor the safety of the call. We've never really had a problem with them relinquishing. Most of them feel over their head when they get there anyway, and it ends up being our chiefs that are directing the crews anyway. And so we would never leave our folks in an unsafe position. And so at the point that it deteriorates to that, we would just withdraw and come home.
Okay. I just, you start reading about stuff going on down there, and lawsuits, and you got Department of Labor's after them for doing some stuff, and it just kind of started questioning. It's like, I don't know, I just want us to be cautious on moving forward with this mutual aid agreement until they got their stuff together, my opinion, personally.
Right. And we've been monitoring that closely, and we will continue to do that. I had the same thoughts that I've been slow to put this together. I really thought by the time we got to the first meeting in January, they were going to be through their first round of their first case date, but they've extended that, and I don't even know when it is. So we are watching that carefully. The contract does still have an easy out for us. We can opt out of it with 60 days notice at any time. Or if they breach the contract, we can get out of it instantly. So, yeah, we're watching that closely, because it has been a lot of drama, and a lot of unanswered questions.
I guess my question, going back to this summer when we first started talking about it, and I think you went down there and presented to their board 2 different options. Did they ever pick one?
They did not. They chose at that point, that's when they hired a new fire chief who has guaranteed that they would get enough people in to run their own calls. And so that's why we went ahead and terminated the current mutual aid agreement that we had and rewrote this one to better cover us.
And I guess West Dolan are gonna follow along with us then?
Yes, they presented them with the same terms that we have presented them with.
All right, thank you.
I, in addition, had heard that there was also equipment issues, that a lot of their equipment was out of date or old or whatever. Do they have to wait for us to get there before?
I know that they talked a lot about the lack of maintenance on some of their equipment, and they have been working on that. Again, when we respond, we're taking our own equipment as well, so if we feel like that's an issue, we're just going to utilize ours if we happen to be on the scene.
Yeah. But in the few cases that have happened recently where you said they've handled their own, then they've had sufficient equipment and manpower to do it before you got there or with you or whatever. I mean, it's been satisfactory to you.
Well, satisfactory to the point that I know that they didn't call us. I mean, so that means that really they haven't had a call. They haven't had a fire. I personally haven't been on a structure fire down there, in there, with or without them in probably 2 years, 2.5 years.
Okay.
So it simply doesn't happen often for them, so that's good and bad. So they certainly won't have enough personnel to handle their own structure fire, and that's why we'd fully expect them to call mutual aid. But all of their small call, I mean, we were doing everything from smoke detector checks to picking people off the ground, and they've been managing to make those calls and take care of their own citizens.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to give the council an update, John, the chief and I have talked about this quite a bit, and we're staying out of the drama, so to speak, that's going on down there. But we're just trying to be a good neighbor, and as we would hope anybody else would if we had our own issues that we were dealing with, and make sure that the people in that area don't necessarily pay that price. And so that's why we haven't just thrown our hands up and said, "Heck with it, you do it yourself," because we feel like that we're just kind of being neighborly and providing what we can to support, while at the same time making sure that we're, one, being as efficient as we can with our own taxpayer dollars, and two, making sure that our own employees are not at risk.
Well, I mean, I 100% agree, because, I mean, I feel sorry for the residents of that fire district that aren't being properly covered, and I blame the fire district board for not taking, you ran for a position, and it's your job, just like the 9 of us do up here, that you ran a position to take care of those people, and I think that's where my frustration with them is. I mean, if you got rid of a fire chief, you got to go find a new fire chief. I mean, we have to do that here. So it's just, I want to help them out, but I just want to make sure that I don't like the word. I like the word enable. I mean, I think we were enabling them for the last year or so to not worry about their fire district, and we took care of it. And I just don't want to put our equipment in harm's way or people in harm's way.
I think that with us terminating the old agreement, we've stopped the enablement, so to speak, to use your term, and now we're just going essentially to make sure that it's handled at least above board from our own perspective.
I guess on the flip side of what Dave said about mutual aid going down there, are you anticipating using them at all? I mean, do you understand where I'm going with this?
No, not so far. I mean,
I'm
not sure.
I'm still afraid that we're going to be providing aid without.
That is true. I just want to be able to evaluate. Again, I want, if I bring them in here, I want to know what I'm bringing, and so I envision first thing that I might start using them for once they've proven that they're keeping their people that they're training is a tanker. For me, is going to be the biggest asset I could call them for. But as of this time, I'm not going to include them in any automatic aid agreements yet.
All right, just keep an eye on that. Anybody else? Angela, James? Any other questions for A or B? C, contract for painting of fire stations 1 and 2.
In November, we put out an RFP for painting of the fire stations, specifically the bay areas where we park all the vehicles that gets kind of grimy and dirty that hasn't been painted in a very long time. And then any exterior parts of the stations that have paint on them will be repainted and freshened up. We received 2 qualifying bids that we took a look at. The one we chose is with a company called Impact Painting, who has a history of working for some other cities that I was able to talk to and was very happy with their work. So they came in both lowest bid and lowest and best bid. So once we get that approved in January, they'll get started sometime after that as weather permits, and hopefully finish that before spring. So I'll have that bid put into the packet for you guys' review for the next meeting.
Any questions? Hearing none. D, vehicle purchase.
Greg had presented to you guys a few meetings ago that we were working on getting bids for some vehicles through Ford. Even the small vehicles have been quite difficult. And so we went through all the process, picked everything we needed on trucks and turned them in, hoping that the power of purchasing more together was going to be helpful, only to find out that Ford allotted 1 Super Duty vehicle for the entire city of Belton. So I don't know how many he was ordering. I needed 2. So we went ahead and reached out and got bids from GMC and Chevy as well, to see who could give us the best prices and the quickest delivery. So we do believe we found 2 GMC pickups that are going to be suitable. So those will also, I'll have those bids open for you guys to look at and vote on in the next meeting as well.
Any questions? Item E, Fire Department ARPA grant.
It seems there's still a lot of ARPA money floating around to give away. So I believe it was $10 million allotted through the Division of Fire Safety for fire services, $10 million for EMS services, and $20 million for police departments. It kind of seems like almost a formality to me. So we're going to go ahead and submit for those bids. It's for those grants. It's a maximum $40,000 grant with a 50% match. But the nice thing about the match is it's called an in-kind match. So it won't be cash out of our pocket. I'm going to be able to use purchases all the way back to March 2020 to use as our part of the matching funds. So it will essentially be $20,000 in grants to us with really no additional money out of our pocket. And they do allow us, I thought it was kind of strange, but since we run the EMS, we're going to be able to apply for both. And so on the fire side, we're applying for monies to help purchase more bunker gear next year. We already currently, by contract with Local 42, supply our members with 2 sets of gear, and we would give them a new set every 5 years. Bunker gear expires every 10 years, and so that keeps them with fresh gear. So it'll offset our cost of gear that we were already going to buy next year. On the EMS side, the grant proposal is for some training for, it's a certified, not advanced. It's an advanced training, though, for our paramedics that we want to do a pilot program on. And what we can do when we have these particular certifications with our paramedics on some of the calls out of the hospital, we can actually charge more to Medicare and receive more for those calls for patients that are on multiple drugs, drips, or if they're on ventilators and things like that, we'd be able to charge a little extra on those. So we want to do that as a pilot program. There'll be a few pieces of equipment and bags that we're requesting in that grant as well to help fund that.
Any questions? Item F, 1100 Main Street vacation of right-of-way, new utility easement and right-of-way dedication.
Yep, the Planning Commission held a public hearing last week for the partial vacation of existing unimproved right-of-way south of 1100 Main Street. As part of the vacation, there is a utility easement that will need to be reserved under that area, as there currently are utilities within that unimproved right-of-way. And then additionally, there is inadequate right-of-way along the Main Street frontage of 1100 Main Street that would be dedicated as well. So all 3 of those items are anticipated to become before council at the next meeting.
Any questions? Hearing none, I think we're going to pull G because Greg's gone.
I'm not sure I want to slow down the timeline on G. So what I would anticipate us doing, because Greg had a personal emergency he had to attend to, is we could put together a more detailed full staff report and get it all to you guys, so that way you're prepared to ask questions and maybe even act on it for in January.
That makes
if
sense.
that works.
I'm good with that, yeah. H, Cambridge West Culvert change order. Same.
Yeah, same thing. I believe it's about a $60,000 change order. This is the Cambridge West Culvert project that's been dragging on and on and on and on, that our residents are probably have been tired of for months, that everybody's tired of. We had that delay with the utility relocation in that area for a long time. That project, just to give you an update on that, since we're talking about it anyway, and I think I told everybody here, but the public needs to know that we will be opening that street or that road. It won't be paved and finalized, but we should have it open in the next week or two. And then it'll be gravel, I think, until the spring, when it's warm enough to do the final pavement on that. So.
Any questions on G or H? I, golf course equipment purchase.
We'll be bringing to the council at the next city council meeting some equipment that we are looking to purchase under the fiscal year 23 budget. We were demoing some equipment this fall and have received some pricing on that, so we're going to move forward with bringing that to you for your approval at the next council meeting.
Any questions? Item J, amendment to 2-219 with state updates.
Section 2-219 of the Code of Ordinances, we list the reasons authorized by RSMO 610.021 for closed meetings and closed records. Section 2-219 of our code has not been updated since 2014, and there have been 5 RSMO updates since that time. So this will be coming to the next council meeting to amend this section of our code to bring it into compliance with the statute changes.
Any questions? Item K, benefits RFP.
The city hasn't gone out to bid.
Not on.
Thank you. The city hasn't gone out to bid for health insurance broker for at least 10 to 13 years. And so there's an opportunity now to try to go out, look for qualified brokers that would help us not only with the service compliance, but cost mitigation, so we can make the best choices for the city. So that is going to go out in the very near future, with the expectation that we would have bids back by the end of January, and to then make changes prior to the fiscal year starting April 1st.
Go ahead.
I mean, well, you've been here 8 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I go back, when does our insurance renew? Is it January 1?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. Part of the process, I always like this to be done before the renewal process. That way these people are actually doing the work or making the money, where the last agency right now basically had to do the renewal. And now we're going to take them off the thing. And I guess my next question is, are we doing this with the property and casualty also?
This is just for the health insurance.
We're not looking at property and casualty because that's the same type of process. I mean,
It's the same type of process, and we can look at that as well. But
is it all through NPR now?
Yeah, that's all NPR. This is, we have a separate broker for our benefits, and that's
Yep. Well, one time I know we used to have some outside insurance through an agency out of Harrisonville for the city, and I didn't know if we still had that or not because we never talk about it. So
right. Yeah. No. I mean, we're looking at everything. I mean, we'll look at the property and casualty and all that stuff as well.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Item L, public art development fee.
Yeah, I wanted to get this on, start this conversation publicly to see what kind of feedback there is, what kind of concerns there might be. Staff is going to prepare and bring to the council an idea to add a public art development fee to new development in the city, which would allow us to add a public art component to a lot of different things throughout our community. We don't have a lot of public art to begin with here in Belton, And there are a lot of studies that showed that quality of life is enhanced with public art, and it can lead to economic growth and all kind, resident satisfaction. All of those issues can be impacted with public art. And so the idea is the concept that we're playing with now, and again, this is still conceptual right now, is a 1% development fee that would go into a fund that, and we've talked about previously about doing a public arts commission or a public arts council that they could dedicate potentially or recommend for the council to dedicate monies for public art projects throughout the city. I think it'd be especially useful in areas that we're doing redevelopment, such as downtown and the North Scott, and then any other new development areas to add the public art component. So I'd love to have any feedback that you guys might have now. And again, it's not a done deal by any means. And I'll be bringing you some information on other communities and what they're doing, and I'll get you some of the data that I've seen on how public art can be a benefit to our community.
Any questions?
Just that I think it's a good idea, Joe.
Yeah, it's not a brand new concept. There are cities that already do something like this.
I've seen some in Chillicothe. It's got all kinds of murals that really makes the town interesting.
Absolutely.
Are you thinking both public and private projects?
Yeah, any new development that comes through, that, I mean, we would put it as just a 1% or whatever percent fee that that the council decided on.
Anybody else? Item M, personnel policy review, sorry.
It's our last work session item, and it's the heavy lift of the whole group. So I'm going to pass out what you're getting is the copy of the ordinance that was proposed, I believe in November, that was tabled. Just so you can look at what the actual ordinance would say. And essentially what we would be doing with this ordinance is taking our personnel code if you look at our code of ordinances, we have our personnel policies are essentially codified. They're under a personnel code. And now having a personnel code is required by our charter, but it doesn't have to, all of our policies don't have to be included within that code. We can, and it's not generally best practice to do so, because it makes it very unpliable. It requires literally an ordinance to change. And so the idea is that we take the personnel policy out of code, and not necessarily change overwhelmingly everything, but then there are some things, if we're looking at doing that leads to some conversation and some discussion of what makes sense and what would be best for us to propose in a new personnel policy. Because if we were to take the codified portion of our policy out of code and create a policy, we'd have to do it in conjunction with actually adopting a policy that would be in place for our employees. And so essentially I'd like to I open up the floor for any discussion or questions. I can go through and list most of the changes. You guys should have received I know you did receive way back in November, kind of a redlined version. It kind of goes through our existing personnel code and lists the changes. And I know that in the packet you guys have what we have as our proposed policy. I've identified about a dozen and a half things that are the big changes. Most of the changes are going to be in just trying to clean up the language and make it simpler and kind of reorganize it to make it more fluid and make sense. But I'll point out some of the big what I consider the bigger changes. One is we added non-discrimination to the EEOC section, so we think that's a welcome change. We changed comp and overtime so that we essentially are eliminating comp time for exempt employees. We think exempt employees, salaried employees, they can use flex time if they need to, because salaried employees they don't have the same restrictions that non-salaried employees do, and so we don't think that the need for comp time exists for salaried employees. There's updated language to mirror the Missouri Commission on Human Rights for genetic information, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Again, trying to be more inclusive. We took life, disability, and temporary disability insurance out of the policy as it exists. Those are rights that the staff has, that we include those in our benefits package. That doesn't mean we want to take that out of the benefits package. I'm not saying that we need to get rid of the life insurance, disability insurance, temporary disability insurance offerings that we have in our benefits package. I just don't think that it's necessary to codify it or even have it as part of our actual policy. Eligibility, we took out almost everything in the eligibility clause of the personnel code, with the exception of that we want the best qualified candidates to be considered. And one key change in that, and I want to bring this to your attention so there aren't any surprises when we get to this, is it would eliminate the department head approval provision from the city council. So that's one part of that eligibility part, is that the city council has the approval of department heads, and in the proposed one, that one has been taken out. So residency requirements. In the proposed personnel policy, we've eliminated the department head or the police chief, fire chief, and public works director residency requirements. Obviously, there's a residency requirement now for those three and myself. Mine would still be there. Those three, I recognize that there currently is an allowance for you guys to make exceptions to that residency policy. I would point out that two of our three folks that are currently supposed to have a residency requirement, we have given an exception to. So if it's something that we don't think is super important, then I think that maybe we should just take it out of the policy, and that way it opens it up for future applicants. It's not,
Isn't that, I think that has to be a charter amendment, doesn't it?
that specifically is not in the charter. Those three are not.
The only staff members that are mentioned in the charter is the city manager, the city attorney, the city clerk, and used to be the police chief. But with the charter amendment in 2018, the police chief was removed from the charter.
There you go.
I've always been pretty in the middle on that, but I know years ago it was a very hot subject on the council, and pretty much divided.
Sure.
Some of the old timers of the city truly felt like all department heads need to have some skin in the game and live in the city.
I think I mean, personally as a city manager, I want to live in the city, right? I think it makes sense for us to live in the community that we're making decisions for, or that we're providing service for, especially at the highest levels. I think we should probably try to incentivize living in the city even without this requirement. But there are ways to do that without actually having a requirement. You know, there are things we could do, like, bonuses or extra pay rate or something based on if you have if you live within the city limits. And so I just wanted, the reason against having these requirements is that it does limit your candidate pool sometimes.
That is one big problem with it.
Yeah, and
did you say that there's, other than you, the city manager, it still remains the police chief, fire chief?
Police chief, fire chief, and public works right now are in the code that they're supposed to.
But this would take them out.
This would take them out in this policy. And again, all these changes, I want to make this point. All of these changes are proposed. I mean, if you like a lot of the policy that's in here, and some of these changes you don't want, then I mean, I would ask that you not vote this down just because you don't like one or two things in here. If you want to try to amend this, to me, that's the best way to try to handle that. If there's one or two things that you think you don't agree with, then amend what we've got, and then adopt it. That'd be my recommendation. But anyway, there are some other ones that I want to make sure you guys are aware of. One, bereavement pay. Right now, it says that if we have an employee that dies while employed, that we would pay up to $10,000 of burial expenses, and we that's been $10,000 for like 20 some years. I'm pretty sure. I looked at there hasn't been an update on that for a while. I looked at that.
Irregardless how long it's been, it probably needs updated.
Yeah. We're asking for 15. I mean, it's not a crazy amount. When that last time it happened, it hasn't happened recently. I'll tell you that. There's a transfer provision that's in the policy. I don't know that we need to have an actual policy for transfers. I think that we can handle transfers internally without having a policy, if that makes sense. There's an appeal process for probationary employees in there. I'm not sure that we want to have the appeal process for probationary employees, regardless of how you feel about the appeal process, any appeal process for other employees. We took the list of fireable offenses out of the policy. If you look in our current personnel code, it literally has a list of potential fireable offenses. We're not sure that we need to have that. I think a lot of those things are legal issues and things that you would fire someone for. And so I just, again, I'm not sure we need to, and then when you list something, there's always going to be something that you didn't list that might come up. And the last thing we want to do is have that. So we just took that out of the policy altogether. We added a drug-free workplace component to it. We cleaned up the sick leave pool language. Bereavement leave counts as hours worked for overtime purposes. That's a change that we made in there. Nepotism, we took out all the provisions for nepotism. The state has ethics laws in place that handle nepotism already. We don't need to be more restrictive than that, we don't believe. If you look at the state ethics laws that exist, they're there, and they do have some limits for nepotism, and I think that they're reasonable. Obviously, we can't be looser than the state regulations anyway, so we just feel like if we took it out, then we wouldn't have to worry about it because it's already being handled by the state ethics laws. Lunches and breaks, there are literally things about lunches at lunch, how much time for lunch and break information is in the personnel code. I think that we should leave that up to departments to decide. If you, for instance, it says 45-minute lunches in there, and I'm not sure that anybody follows that. I think that we do lunches as we need to do lunches, and they're generally about an hour. And it's, again, I think we should just clean that up by taking that out. Pecuniary is a funky word. We changed it to financial. And it's generally in regards to conflicts of interest. And then lodging and meals, we've updated that quite a bit and kind of trying to go, there's a lot of older stuff in there, and we were trying to kind of go to just following the federal per diem. They have literally, the federal per diem has a list of areas, and it gives the per diem based on the cost of living in those areas, and so we would follow that essentially if this were approved. And then, of course, last but not least is the appeals process for terminations and demotions, which is something I actually feel like probably should be removed for a number of reasons. One, it allowing the appeals process, for those who are unfamiliar at home, if you might be watching this, it essentially says that any termination or demotion can be appealed up to the city council for a hearing. And we think that's not the best practice. Most other Missouri cities do not have the appeal process in their policies, mostly because their charters do not allow it. And you can potentially make the argument that our charter doesn't allow it either. It puts all employees into unnecessarily uncomfortable situations. For fear of being called to participate in an appeal process, the employees are forced to take side of the supervisor or the employee who was terminated or demoted, and that's not a fair situation, I think, to put staff in. It introduces a political component to routine staff decisions. As long as the council holds final authority for all staff employment decisions, and staff members are not responsible for fulfilling their job duties if they have 5 votes politically. That's essentially what that says. And then I think, like I said, I think that you can make a pretty strong argument that it does contradict the city charter to have an appeal process in there. So. And I don't want, we can talk about legal issues and stuff like that in executive session that we have scheduled. So that's my report. I'd love to hear any feedback, concerns, something that you saw in here you didn't like that I didn't mention, or that you did hear that you would like to change, or something not in here you want.
I have just questions. Several times you say full-time, or a couple of times you say full-time employment.
Mm-hmm.
What is full-time employment? Is there a definition, or or you just hire somebody and say, okay, you're full-time, you're part-time?
Well, they're full-time.
Per week, or?
Well, yeah, it's generally an hours per week thing, and it actually is not consistent because certain types of jobs have different full-time schedules, if that makes sense. Like, for instance, in Public safety, sometimes they have different work shifts and work hours. They might work 48 hours instead of 40. And then, of course, there are federal regulations of what's considered full-time for when it comes to like offering benefits and those sorts of things. And so we have to abide by those as well.
'Cause, at some point it says 1875 hours per year, which would cover people who have weird shifts. But it wasn't clear to me, because I usually don't worry about these things, whether that includes their vacation, includes their sick days, and I mean, if a full-time employee who has 5 or 6 weeks of vacation isn't going to work 1875 hours a year.
Generally, most regular employees, I must say regular in a loose term, are going to work 40 hours a week is going to be considered full-time. That when we hire someone, it's for a full-time position. It's generally 40 hours a week unless it's in public safety where they have the shifts where they require the 48 hours or what have you.
That would be 2,080 hours.
Yeah.
A 40-hour employee works 2,080 hours.
Right, but if you take 5 weeks
yeah.
off for vacation, then you're
Vacation and
less.
sick leave wouldn't count towards the
Well, DOL says 30 hours is considered full-time now,
For
but
benefits, yeah.
Yeah, well, we can consider
Benefits
whatever
and
we want.
retirement, all that,
40,
yeah.
whatever.
well,
And then,
retirement's 1,000 hours, so.
Yeah, that's right.
and now that we have, again, marijuana from our previous discussions, and I don't know if it's defined as a legal drug or not, but there's a lot of stuff in there about drug policy and everything. Is I assume I shouldn't assume. If somebody shows up and it's obvious that just before they came into work they were drinking alcohol, then the supervisor is going to have something to say about that.
Right.
And that's in this policy.
Sure.
And also under the effect of drugs.
Mhm.
Does that include marijuana?
Yes, it does. That doesn't change just because it's legal to smoke marijuana. If you were to come to work and you thought you're under the influence, and then we can do the same. Yes.
Okay.
Amendment 3, and I'll just hop in. Amendment 3 also specifically authorizes employers to still mandate that employees not show up to work under the influence of marijuana.
Okay. And this is final trivial thing, but at one point it does say how you can be disciplined, and I think I asked you before, the word disloyal is in there. Do you have any idea what that means?
Still not certain on what disloyal means, but I think based on that note, we might go ahead and take out disloyal.
Take it out.
I don't know if that means that like you went over to Raymore to eat lunch.
Right.
Or something like that.
That's being disloyal.
Which I've been to Panda Express before for lunch when I've been out here, so I'm sorry for being
Hey.
disloyal.
Are you rooted for the Grandview football team? I don't know, yeah, okay.
You go to Longview to golf instead of Eagles. I mean, that's being disloyal.
You can ask my father. I've only golfed at Eagles Landing over the past decade. And Jay.
Go ahead.
You mentioned something about city council approval of department heads, wanting to remove that. Can you kind of color in your thought process there?
Yeah, absolutely. Article 3, Section 3.5 of the city charter says, it says as part of it, neither the city council nor any of its members shall in any manner dictate the appointment or removal of any city administrative officers or employees whom the city manager or the city manager's subordinates are empowered to appoint. But the city council as a group may express its views and freely discuss with the city manager anything pertaining to appointment and removal of such officers and employees. And so it is my opinion that that would cover department heads and even the appeals process.
So we could chime in, we wouldn't be voting on it.
Correct.
Appointment or the termination of?
Appointment or removal of any city administrative officers or employees.
I believe there's something in the code about the council has the authority to.
In the personnel code, currently, it's the council has the authority to, or it says the council can appoint department heads, or approves department heads. I appoint the department heads, but you have to approve them. That's how it exists in the current personnel
There's
code.
something about a termination of department heads too.
So for both termination,
That's right.
termination, it specifically states that any termination of a department head has to come to the city council as of right now. And then for the appointment of department heads I just forgot this section, but it's not even 100% clear exactly what the determination is supposed to be, but my interpretation and the prior interpretations of my predecessors has been that the city council doesn't approve the appointment. The city council just doesn't say no to the appointment.
I thought the appointment was if there's two like candidates and one was not living in the city.
That
it's
is
the only time that we get to actually say yes to an appointment.
That is the clearest and most straightforward interpretation, but due to predecessors interpreting it that it still needs to come before you.
Well, I can tell you this, I only appointed one person sitting in front of me.
I believe that
It was Chief Sapp. I mean, I'm not talking about Joe, but
this would be a discussion in close for the other times, but there was at least one other time that I can remember where you did specifically appoint a department head.
and I don't remember hiring Greg Rokus and I mean, I got a call. I was on a golf course when I was told that Chief Lyons was being hired. So I mean, wasn't like I was in a city council meeting when that came in for our approval. So
I know for the one time that I've been brought into that situation, you were all specifically consulted on the final decision to select Matt Wright as the community development director.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I don't know.
That's right, Matt.
We were told we're not.
You made the
Yeah,
determination of his selection.
Now, I mean, just going back in my time here, I mean, yeah, I was here for almost every appointment in front of me. So, yeah, I only remember being in that room one time, and that was fire chief. But I thought that was because of the two internal candidates, one living in a district, one not living in a district, and we had to approve it.
In part, that was what was done there.
I mean, personally, there's some stuff in this stuff that I'm going to amend before I vote for it. I do think council should have some say on the department heads. Me personally, I also think I think we're going to get feedback on people that talk about residency too. I mean, I think department heads for a long time should have lived in the city, and we've always had that approval to allow them not to live in the city. But to counter that is if they ever move again, they have to move into the city, and that's the requirement of our current program with Mr. Rokus or Mr. Sapp. If they do move from their current residence, it has to be into the city of Belton. And me personally, I think residents like that, and I think that's why it was in the charter originally. But you're saying it's not in the charter, but I thought it was in the charter. But, you know, I'm one of 9, so it's just, you know, we've debated this for over a year now, and I just don't know how much closer I am personally, but we'll work through it.
I would say too, Joe, there's no offense to you, but I do feel like the council ought to have a little ability, because we have had situations in the past where.
Well, I don't think it's on Joe either. I mean,
Well,
someday Joe's not going to be here, and then who is that next person? I mean, are we setting the future community up? I mean, we talk about other stuff about setting a future council up for failure because we've changed some rules, and now all of a sudden it's a personality conflict. And
I would mention that if you were to look at the other cities and what they do, though, I mean, they seem to be set up okay as well without having some of these provisions in their code. So,
But I mean, as a city council person, I'm going to sit here and look at you, Joe, like I have past city council people or past city managers, and they said, I want to hire, you know, whoever that name is. You guys did all the interviews.
Sure.
All I'm doing is say, okay, Joe, I agree with you.
well, and I'd hope that, I mean, and the way I plan to handle this, and hope that anybody would handle this, is that regardless of whether it's in the code or not, or whether it's in the policy or not, that the council should know who's part of our leadership team and who's and how that's going and what the process is behind that. I mean, it's.
I think my problem is not the hiring, because we always rubber stamp it.
Sure.
I think it's the firing or termination of an employment. That's what I think council should have more say in, just to make sure it's not a personality conflict between a new city manager and a department head. But
And again, it's not about you or current department heads. I think it's about future.
Yeah. The flip side on that is, not to beat a dead horse, is that then all of a sudden, then anybody on an entire staff of the city, all they need is 5 votes, and then they're pretty much untouchable. And I don't think that's
Well, I mean, I
practice
think
either.
we've had multiple discussions over your 6 months here or whatever about the personnel policy, and
Sure.
what I just said about a personality conflict, when you get that at will, all of a sudden someone could be terminated just because someone doesn't like someone, and I think we have to have some type of protection and for some of that stuff. And I don't know if that's mediation that comes to you and you determine that, or how that works. But I get taking us out, because, I mean, I don't think we should be involved in that process, but I think somewhere down the line, we got to make sure that employee is protected as much as we can.
Anybody
Fair.
else? Oh, go ahead, Angela.
I would say that's why we just hired and appointed an HR director, is so that they can make sure that everything is done correctly and it's not just a city manager having an issue with a specific person. And then if at any time any council ever has concerns that their city manager is personally having issues with personnel, I would say that's time to get rid of the city manager.
Anybody else?
I will add that this is neither here nor there, but it's because it's not 100% related to this. But the addition of an HR director was a big important thing for me, because I wanted to ensure that proper processes were followed, and that you know, if there were terminations, there were for cause, and it was well documented and had gone through the adequate and appropriate, you know, policy essentially to allow, you know, for correction of action and the whole 9 yards. We want to actually have a fair disciplinary process all the way through. So that's part of it.
And likewise, I believe that's why we
Sure.
wanted it and approved it.
Angela's made a very good point too. You know, we've never had an HR department. We've been
Mhm.
trying to get one for 20 years.
That's true.
That would be a big help.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff is philosophical in nature, and to be perfectly frank, we shouldn't need most of it at all anyway.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I would hope that we don't have to worry about an appeals process throughout, because we're treating our employees correctly, and two, that if there's any type of termination that has to take place, then they've gone through the proper disciplinary processes that have given them chance to correct, and that, you know, and it's been handled 100% fairly.
Me personally, it's just making sure the employees understand that we do value them, and
Absolutely.
we're looking out for their best interests too, and all this stuff. And
All right. That being said, I'd entertain a motion to enter an executive session, to discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.1, to discuss matters pertaining to the leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.2, to discuss matters pertaining to hiring, firing, discipline, or promotion of personnel according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.3, discuss matters pertaining to negotiated contracts according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.12, and that the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Yes.
Bryan,
Aye.
White, Richardson,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Kraft.
Aye.
He's not as dressed up.
Motion carries. We're in